DeRozan to win it! Goal! DeMar DeRozan delivers! Feeds DeRozan. DeRozan, pump fake for the win. Got it again! At the buzzer, DeMar delivers again! And DC, we will let ourselves out!
TJ on the
An interesting bit of repeating history in the last 15 years or so is the occurrence of Chicago sports teams having one extremely productive season, usually having large amounts of cap space to play with and acquiring 2 or 3 established players and just overall raising expectations higher than normal, and then destroying those expectations with injuries, poor management, or just losing sight of the team that they built. Some examples of this are the 2010-11 Chicago Bears, who made it to the NFC Championship game just to lose to the Packers after an injury to Jay Cutler, the 2011-12 Bulls, after the injury to D. Rose, bounced them in the first round, and the 2018 Bears, where one of the most promising teams since the previous Bears found themselves in a premature offseason due to god-awful kick. There is another instance of this happening, though, and it's very recent, and that's what I'm here to talk about today. The 2021-22 Chicago Bulls are another team that were stripped of any championship aspirations before they had a chance to prove it. A little history lesson: the season prior, the Bulls finished 31-41, continuing their trend of drafting mediocre talent, refusing to develop them, and then prematurely trading them before their full potential was realized. This was the case with young stars including Lauri Markkanen, Wendell Carter Jr., Daniel Gafford, the list can go on, all who went on to be contributors to teams with real expectations. Lauri now, of course, with Utah, he was an all-star last year. And Wendell and Daniel, solid role bigs, who can defend the rim and run solid pick-and-roll offenses. But Bulls fans were used to this, quite frankly. We're used to Chicago fans in general not being able to develop young talent and then being sent off to do bigger and better things. Something had to change, though. At the end of the 2020 season, we saw the departure of the iconic Garpax duo, who Bulls fans knew so well, and were introduced to the new faces of Arturas Karnisovas and Mark Eversley, Arturas being the president and Mark being the GM. Karnisovas came over from Denver, where he made the notable contributions of Paul Millsap, Michael Porter Jr., the duo of Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. So things were looking up at the start of the 2021-22 season. The Bulls roster was near recognizable from the previous year. We had scrapped the roster almost completely, with the exception of Zach LaVine, Kobe, and Patrick Williams. In red are the players who started the 2020 season with the Bulls, but did not start the 2021 season. In blue are players who did not start the 2020 season with the Bulls, but finished with them and would go on to start the 2021 season. And in green are Zach, Kobe, and Patrick. So this new team had a new era basketball feel to it. One of fast-paced offenses and youth. We had additions including Lonzo Ball, Nikola Vucevic, Derrick Jones Jr., Alex Caruso, Alize Johnson, and of course the rookie Ayo Dosunmu, and then obviously star DeMar DeRozan. Now, DeMar didn't necessarily fit into the fast-paced system that Chicago seemed to be going for at the time, and I voiced that opinion a lot. I thought he sort of slowed down the offense for what it should have been. He took the ball out of facilitators' hands, including Lonzo and Zach, and he slowed the game down to a point where defenses could relax and take a break when DeMar had the ball, because they knew that he was likely going to shoot the ball if he had it in his hands. He took a back seat, though, this first year, and I was extremely surprised, and it made me happy knowing that he was able to be less selfish with the ball and allowed the rest of the team to do their job, and it worked out well. All these acquisitions and the scrapping of the team core was clearly an attempt to modernize their team, of which we wanted to compete with teams like Boston, Golden State, Miami, Memphis, all teams who had these young, fast-paced cores who were succeeding where we weren't. So, obviously, this rebuild aimed at being able to compete with those teams. Come preseason time, the Bulls would face off against the Cavs in the first game, who were still considered a young, fast-paced team, still fresh off the LeBron train, but they were still considered a younger, fast-paced team who had something to prove. It just wasn't as refined yet. Nonetheless, it would be a radical understatement to say that the Bulls killed the Cavs in elite fashion.
I was a big fan of him last year. There's a steal.
Levine into Markkanen, leaves it for DeRozan.
Got love in the post. Good
Nice
hands.
play by Lonzo Ball.
Bulls got numbers. Run.
Brown, Ball, back to Caruso, to the rim.
Let me get some butter with that roll. Good
Ball,
back cut.
height, back cut, Levine.
Watch your hand, don't jump.
Caruso
Go get it.
for Levine.
Throw it upstairs. Watch the afro. Watch the afro. Jared Allen.
Nice lead pass for Caruso, back to DeRozan.
Oh, I'm telling you, it's going to be a lot of that this year, Bulls fans. Drive home safe in Chicago. I'm going to be saying that a lot this year, baby.
This game single-handedly showed every team in the league exactly what our ceiling was, and I'm sure it flooded some coaches' trousers with diarrhea. The ball movement was elite, the spacing was elite, the ball flow was elite, and above all, the defense. And if it wasn't already clear from the clips, Lonzo was the central piece in everything coming together. Him, with the ball, allowed Zach and DeMar to move freely in the offense without drawing as much attention on themselves because the defense was too worried about whether or not Lonzo would drive and kick, take it to the rack, hit the rolling big man, or just stroke a J in their face. I have never seen a third or fourth scoring option demand as much attention from a defense as Lonzo did in the first part of the season. The Bulls finished 4-0 in the preseason with an average point margin of 14 points. 14 points. Obviously, it was just preseason, so it would be premature to hype them up that much. Through the first 40 games of the season, the Bulls were 27-13 and were showing no signs of slowing down. The only hiccup was an occasional COVID protocol, which would really only affect one or two players at a time. At their current pace, we were projected to win 56 games, which would have put us ahead of Miami by 3 games, and Milwaukee, Boston, and Philadelphia by 5. They would have gone to face Atlanta in the first round, certainly beating them. And then went on to play the Sixers, who would have likely lost to us, even though we hadn't beaten Embiid ever in his career until this past 2022-23 season. However, all of this was theoretical, and it would come to haunt Chicago sports fans, as raising expectations of any kind is forbidden. January 14th is a day that will go down in NBA trivia history as Lonzo Ball's last game played to date. He played 23 minutes against the Golden State Warriors and showed no apparent problems, and only left the game due to the Bulls being down by 30 points and wanting to spare their starters of any more embarrassment. Lonzo was reported to be feeling some minor discomfort after the game, and only fearing a bone bruise went in for further testing. The testing would reveal the worst, that Lonzo tore his meniscus in the game against Golden State, and he would need surgery to repair it. This was more than devastating to the team and destroyed any hopes that they had of making a deep playoff run. At the time, Zach was also battling his own knee injury, which would work itself out, although it was scary at the time. Regardless, this injury to Lonzo had an instant impact to the Bulls' entire playstyle. An offense that before had no fear of pushing the ball up the floor to tire out teams was now the ones losing the race. A defense that once stood unchallenged at the top of all defensive statistics plummeted to the bottom, where it would set up camp for the coming years. After going 11-8 in the remaining games before the All-Star break, it felt like the season had taken a turn for the worst. The 5-game win streak leading up to the All-Star break felt completely undeserved, and the return wasn't much better. 8-23 was their big playoff push for the remainder of the season after the break. And honestly, I don't even want to analyze those games. It was so bad. The only reason I tell myself that will preserve my sanity was that they were saving their energy for the playoffs, although obviously this wasn't the truth. Come playoff time, the struggles persisted and even were magnified. The Bulls would go on to face the Bucks in round 1, who were fresh off another 50-season win, looking happy as ever entering the series. The Bulls would split 1-1 the first 2 games and gain an advantage going into Game 3 as Chris Middleton went down with an injury late in Game 2, which gave the Bulls the only hope they had at winning the series. This, of course, didn't happen, and we would go to drop the final 3 games of the series, losing by an average of 23 points, ending the season on the worst possible note that could be conjured by any script. Honestly, I'm getting sick of talking about them at this point, as no other considerable achievements have been made since. So with that being said, the summary of all this is that Lonzo and players like him, with his IQ, sense of the court, mental and physical abilities, and sheer talent, make them the best undervalued players in the league, and I hope to one day live in a world where these players are recognized just as much as their superstar counterparts.